take a seat. There are empty seats, so it's more comfortable for you and also for the general disposition. So please take a seat and we're going to start.
Do you hear me? Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. So I would like to welcome you all on the sixth session with the title Transformations. There are a few changes for the program because Hadi Damian finally couldn't come, so he will not have the presentation. And as the first one, we will have Stefania Chenean with the presentation of Prague Quadrennial. So if you can start, maybe only for the beginning, to say that all three women, Tali, Marina, and Stefania, are quite long-term collaborator of the Prague Quadrennial. They've been national curators for several times, so their experience is very long-term, and they have I guess they can tell us on the experience on different editions of the Quadrennial. So, and Stefania and Christian will start with the presentation called just Prague Quadrennial.
Hello, everyone. May I sit down? PQ last two themes, tools for overcoming inertia, is my title. Prague Quadrennial already occupies a very honorable place in the award-winning European palette of cultural events. See the EFE Prize, which was predictable since the 2011 PQ. The tremendous efforts made for the last editions by the staff, the section curators, the country's curators, the students, prove that the scenography has its own artistic language of great force, not only during the live performances, but also during a theatrical exhibition. This language was employed in a way that changed the PQ from a collector's point of view to a living underlining of creative process. In contemporary theater, the phenomenon of interdisciplinarity, while combining visual arts with meanings of theatrically, occurs naturally to capture the nowadays audience. Beyond the extensive culture tradition, PQ has the merit of bringing together, once every 4 years, tens of thousands of visitors from all over the world who are coming especially to take the pulse of this synthesis art, which is scenography. If during, in 1999, 2003 and 2007 editions, the artistic approaches were still determined by a certain inertia, concerning mainly past and accomplished projects from the participants, the PQ11 and PQ15 were new and atypical, surprisingly dynamic, unpredictable, innovative. Although sometimes we get the nostalgia of Vista Viste, where PQ developed most its traditional aspects, I must admit that the new proposed spaces captured more public. The overwhelming number of students coming from everywhere became a real target of the PQ and was perhaps the most important goal that have been achieved. The crowd was young, and thus it could make a symbiosis between the aesthetics of what is historical and this own feeling of new within the sceneries, which seems to me most significantly. Students in Romania instill that PQ should be understood as possible summer college. So we made great efforts to bring more students at the PQ, at last 50 students per edition since 2007, so that they understand that the changes of the scenographer's profession as offered by the Prague Quadrennial. What distinguishes the 2015 edition was a greater openness to all general aspects of contemporary scenography, more specifically a wider range of opportunities for affirmation. generated by an original concept, a canopy under which all the new sections appear, followed by a manual and precise deadlines, the 2011 edition made the creators respond to constraints that generated diversity. If in 2007 our county's participation was much unfulfilled, although the county's artistic production design was by no means neglected, some of our work has been appreciated and promoted. In his conclusion from 2007 edition, Mr. Aronson, representative mentioning of one Romanian student, honored and motivated us to continue in our approach. In Romania, until 2011, PQ remained an all-important event only for Romanian scenographers, as the press was only writing an article or two. Reporters, journalists, and theater critics from Romania who visit the PQ11 found how interesting the pavilions of the participating counties were. Only then I realized how little people knew about how scenography may be seen as while showing in Prague. Thus PQ entered the consciousness of many Romanians who previously had not known about this phenomenon. As a consequence, we are invited to show our participation section from Prague in the Romanian National Theatre Festival. But time was very short and organizers didn't find a proper space for the exhibition. Last year, we managed to respond to the second invitation. The festival gave us a theater space that had been presented in the architecture section at the PQ11. We showed both the students and the country's section for Romania public for the first time who could not come to Prague. I'm maintaining the view that PQ success depends primarily on the original of the theme, which triggers a new type of energy impacting on curators and artists on PQ's public and spaces. We don't have any worries about the future organization of the event, and we wish the future PQ organizers to much awaited success.
Thank you, Stefania. And now I will invite Marina Maleni with her presentation, questioning. And Marina is with us since 2007, so it was 3 editions that you curated or organized.
Well, sorry for reading. I had an issue with my presentations view, but I'll try my best to be in time. Welcome to Pick Questions. Needless to say, after yesterday's sessions, I almost scratched everything and sat in a corner and refused to say anything, but seeing that different points of view are well respected, I decided to dare and do go ahead with the presentation. A couple of words of introduction first, because I'm a firm believer in creating a framework in which to receive things, especially when time is of essence. I come of a theater, sociology, communication, and journalism background. I believe in communication as a panacea, curing all illnesses, and I believe in theater as perhaps the best way of communication, a means of building good citizens, better societies, creating a better tomorrow, and advancing ideas, an excellent means to be political as well. For some, this might sound terribly romantic, dated, or silly, but not in my philosophy. Far from it. I believe in wonder, in awe, in being moved. I also must tell you that I come from an island. For some, this meaning a closed circuit, being an island, whether it be a closed circuit of artistic interaction, mobility, of movement of interaction and exchange of ideas. For others, an island can mean a heaven of opportunities as everything seems within reach. I strongly believe a world meeting such as PQ is imperative and needs to continue to happen. a heaven of communication, interaction, disagreement, and enlightenment. And it is our duty to find and create the framework within which new participants and audiences will know what the exhibit is. That's why we talk about identity all the time. And whether it is for them or not. Returning participants and audiences will have the fulfillment and challenge to come in order to be challenged and enlightened. New audiences and participants will be able to join us. How I saw the PQ change. This is, I was appointed curator for Cyprus National Exhibit in 2007 when we joined the Industrial Palace exhibition with Theta, presenting the work of 9 designers representing the young generation of Cypriot design with Andy Bargili's design at the exhibit. At that point, to us, PQ was primarily a great way to promote the work of designers abroad, and perhaps the only one. Then, in 2011, with Shifting Spaces, I had a chance to work with 2 great designers, Melita Kuta and Haris Kafkaridis, Paravan Productions. We traveled in the wonderful world of making a statement within the given theme and expanding our works of scenography into an interactive installation idea of packed to-go stuff in accordance with Shifting Spaces. And then last year with Creatures, this is again 211, Creatures of Imagination was inspired by 2 performances and 2 designers who designed the installation as well, that we believed answered exactly to the challenge posed by the theme, music, weather, politics. Creatures of theater urging us to go back inside and search within us and our imagination for solutions. Creatures using means of discovery, playfulness, and creativity to find out what's there. Calling us back to humanity and its basics in order to discover solutions to crisis. Our country being in the middle of a major crisis with practically no budget and no means of having performers in Prague for the duration of the exhibit, we had to find almost primitive solutions to our ideas, and this was just in tune with what the scenography for the performances, Gali Kanzar and company, was inspired by, and what the creatures themselves suggested. Gali Kanzari, coming up from the center of the earth, to convince people to start using their imagination again as a matter of utmost importance and existence for them, as they are creatures of imagination. And Birds by Aristophanes with their known proposals to humans. I saw PQ shifting from something almost static in definition, if I may be allowed the term, to an ever-changing definition or lack of, thus providing freedom, which is great. Us theater people, because we do talk about identity, whether artists or organizers incessantly search for reasons and identities, and communication people certainly do. This helps us grasp the framework within which we better understand things. Traveling through time and space in PQ, I arbitrarily assumed the identity of a PQ family member, feeling both connected and responsible with its people, the plans, the changes this feast is undergoing, both in size, space, and concept. This led to a search for the exhibition's path through the lens of a defined identity. What are the various needs to be met? What are the challenges we face when organizing a world scenography event such as PQ? Because I do think that's an integral part of its identity. And who are we? Who is PQ organized primarily for? Have we defined it? Is it primarily the theater designers, the scenographers, composers, the conceptualists, the dramaturgs, or is it the contemporary artists in general? Is it the general audience? Is PQ an installation mongering festival with an aim to impress regardless of theater or performance artwork, or is it a shrine for theater design people and artists who want to be informed and wish to creatively interact and forward art with their practices? The 2 ends of it. I think it's neither or maybe both. Searching identities of audiences, participants, organizers, the exhibit itself is not an attempt to limit us. It is an attempt to define us, even if this definition is so vast it can almost fit anything, should we decide this is what we want. There has to be a framework or a conscience, as was said yesterday, in order to each of the above elements to decide whether and how it can exist within it. I dare to think it's almost like a campaign. We need to look for the target group. We need to look for the characteristics of the audience. Which are the target groups, the primarily one, the secondary ones? What do they need? Why do they come? What do we want to tell them? What's the point we want to make? So, I've tried to summarize it with 10 questions. Please keep type for me. One, and I've lost the continuation, but I don't have much to show other than words being reallocated so as to make a point that indeed it's what we will decide it to be, but the ingredients are there and we just need to to pinpoint them. So, how do organizers and decision makers receive the perceptions of all these groups described before, audience, participants, organizers, in shaping the next PQ? This symposium is an excellent start, but are all groups represented? Do we know our target audience? Do we know who we want to communicate with? What groups are included in the audience that we want to communicate with, and what do we want to communicate with them, and how? There's many answers to this. What is the main aim of this quadrennial meeting? Is it mainly for performance design and architecture professionals to get to know each other's work, be inspired, work together, interact, be challenged, etc.? Is it the main aim of PQ to embrace all sorts of art expression if this is at a cost for design or performance design itself? Listening to the conversation this morning, I was thinking maybe the next PQ could be an exploration of what each country, each student, each part of the world thinks of what is scenography. Is the designer's expectation to see what goes on in other countries of the world and be challenged by these as to where one's own country's scenography wants to go? Is this met with PQ as it is now organized? Can we create a precise framework for the unknown to exist and be exhibited in, thus creating a purpose for things or creating the grounds for wonderment? Can we please strengthen the idea of the national exhibit so as to continue to have countries which otherwise will be lost, unable to secure funds, justify importance, or achieve support for participating at a local level? PQ has my age. Yes, and it has definitely evolved and changed a great deal from being a conservative presentation of scenographic and architectural works to being a dialogue, a great free dialogue between performance design and the city itself, the crises and joys of music, weather, politics, etc. But can we keep the scenography in the Greek sense of the word scene and inscription or writing in its central core? Can we keep the notion of a preconceived framework of communicating through art or any kind of stage or space a requirement for exhibits? Is that something we do want? Installations. A great talk about whether installations should or shouldn't be there. Can we maybe invite them with provisions in quotes? If they are a means of creating similar stimuli and responses to the audience as a specific design or a performance or communicating a message, otherwise we may open up to collaborations with biennales and host works from there, regardless of whether they have a scenographic element in the Greek sense of the word or not. Similarly with performances, if they're new pieces, regardless of the 4 years that passed, then this becomes a festival of performances, not design originating, not necessarily being defined in the time span that the Quadrennial is using. Again, this would be acceptable. Should this be what we want? Is it? I'm on to 8, almost done. Creating environments for scenes is not all the same. I have difficulty disconnecting from theater and disengaging text or word or message from our work, even if it's not spoken. Secure meaning, secure the message, please, the drive, the need to communicate it through the work. 9, Inner Island, PQ is a great forum, and I need to share this with you, for exporting your work if you're a theater or performance designer or an architect even. Yes, we've had some. It is a great honor to be chosen. It has been one of the very few, but not the maybe it was the only way for many years to exhibit and interact internationally. It is considered primarily a feast for theater designers, as they can see, interact, be influenced, work, and be exposed to all that is happening to the work in the rest of the world. So could we maybe create a framework within which even the little players will be able to continue to play without being swallowed by the great ones? Can we keep PQ a huge party for all on one hand, where on the other hand, all can find their voice, and not a party of the few who will enter a sea of everything, but with working life jackets only for the few? In closing, just a short remark. Yeah, I'm at the right slide. I think PQ 2019 cannot ignore what I call the wave. I propose that it can be a central theme. And I am, of course, not only talking of the wave of refugees, the wave that by then might be forgotten or still growing. The people of each wave, whether it be refugees or extremists, will be part of Europe still. And for artists with political conscience and social souls, this cannot go unnoticed, I think. Or can it? Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. And now with a few notes on the Prague Quadrennial, Tali Itzaki.
Sorry, I don't have my presentation. Just talking. I'm sorry not to have a presentation. I'm just talking. I'd like to thank Sodia and Pavla, and especially Daniela, for this opportunity. It should never be taken for granted that a production organization can also follow with theory and conferences. And it's amazing to see Daniela, that I'm used to see in the office, solving millions of problems, chairing the conference as well. Thank you so much. I guess I'm Tali Itzhaki from Israel. The first time I came to PQ as an observer was in 1987, since Israel was not yet invited by then to take part in it. Since then, from the following PQ in 1991, when diplomatic relationship between Israel and Czechoslovakia were renewed, I have curated or co-curated 6 Israeli exhibitions. Last year, I have come to PQ 2015 as a spectator again, with no enslaving duties, just to enjoy it. It was a totally different experience, highly recommended. Everything has changed. The world politics, even the map of the world, Czechoslovakia, Prague, PQ, theater, scenography, technology, the media, all have changed, actually, even several times. I could talk of any of these aspects of change, yet I would like to focus here on some of the themes that were less discussed, even though this late in the conference, everything was mentioned. It should be said, of course, I myself have changed since 1987. I was then a very young designer, while PQ was run by formidably elderly people. Now I am an elderly woman, hopefully not a relic yet, admiring the young women running PQ. The subject I would like to focus on is the community of PQ attenders and presenters. I also wish to put forward 2 more words that are lurking in the wings. One would be the theme, maybe a word of the past. The other one, the impolite word that was firstly mentioned today, money. Since money will definitely be a major issue in any possible future. It was said earlier in the symposium that the official aim of PQ founders was to create a showcase for the best of scenography and to build connections to bridge between East and West, which in the political terminology of those days meant the two sides of the Iron Curtain. Just as scenography exists in the realm between the worlds of performing arts and that of the fine visual arts, PQ resides between the realms of exhibitions and performing arts festivals. It is crucial to note that international exhibition consists of two kinds: professional exhibitions such as air saloons, food exhibitions, showtechs, and other likes, and international art fairs like Castle Documenta or various biennales, which were often mentioned here. The difference between these two kinds of exhibition lies in their audience. The first kind caters for professional communities. The second aims mainly for the general public and for the community of professional art audience, consisting mostly of critics and theorists, and not so much of artists themselves. Thus, the establishment of PQ was rather unique, namely creating a professional exhibition for art practitioners. And with the founding of OISTAT, the unique community of scenography artists was created. I believe, and if the Czech people wish to correct me, I will take it. I believe that what made it possible was only the unusual status, political and economic, that Josef Svoboda and the Theatre Institute enjoyed in Czechoslovakia. In the showcase of PQ, the home team had a great advantage, and it was a perfect stage to show the world the phenomenal achievements of Czech scenography. As we all know too well, theater designers rarely have the kind of resources that can create such international events, not even those who work in the wealthy old-fashioned theaters and opera houses, or in the more commercial industry. The PQ had a huge influence on the field of international scenography. As organizations were established, exhibitions were set, and the definition of scenography as an artistic profession became known. Unlike the fashionable talk of imaginary communities, a very real community came to existence. After my first almost traumatic experience of co-curating and producing the first Israeli PQ exhibition in 1991, I went with many of my fellow scenography activists, and many of them became close friends in spite of the geographical distance. As a young designer, and even younger and totally inexperienced curator, I have come to know this amazing community, sharing an enormous treasure of knowledge and experience, from theory to the most practical issues of PQ. I was and still am thankful for a lot of advice I received from dear people like Peter de Kimpe and Pamela Howard, to mention just two of many. Unlike the maddening experience we have in our own countries, it was called here the anger experience, this community shares generosity and solidarity. It is clear to me that PQ gradually became the raison d'etre of the scenography world community. The appeal of the quadrennial was in the fact that it was almost the only way one could see the state and the achievement of the art of scenography was to go to Prague and attend PQ. And it was true for a very long time for the world before the internet. For me, the reason it has become less interesting to present this kind of informative exhibition of scenography was not because I came to dislike traditional theater or scenography. Scenography still relies on the resources and possibilities that are usually found in the big and often defamed institutions. The thing is that I can see and appreciate the work done all over the world on my laptop. Live cameras on Bergen's Opera or the Narodny Divadlo Piazza stream performances from big theaters to the world. And our friends on Facebook and Instagram give us overwhelming possibility to watch scenography. For PQ 2007, I have designed for the Israeli exhibition an artistic version of the separation wall between Israel and Palestine. In my mind, the models that were installed in it were going along with the same visual theme. After that solid representation, I strongly felt we did not necessarily need to present models anymore. And I see the small screens of a version of maquettes that are even in a readier position to be transmitted on the net. I proposed for the next PQ a project that would host performance events that would take place in 2 places or 2 countries at the same time through the internet. I discussed it with Sodia Lotker and Chris Bau in a scenography meeting in Tel Aviv and published a call for participants in Israel. I received several intriguing suggestions, yet none of them came from my colleagues, the Israeli stage designers. Giuliano Merchamis and Smadar Yaharon, 2 of the best and most political performers I've ever met, were respectively enthusiastic for the project. Unfortunately, even before bureaucracy and money problems managed to kill the idea, Giuliano was murdered at his pioneering Freedom Theater at Jenin refugee camp. Years later, I was so pleased in the beginning of this week to read that the beautiful and excellent Palestinian actress, Maisa Abdelhadi, a former student of mine, is about to participate in the London Arcola Theatre play via Skype without leaving her home in Nazareth. I still hope Smadar Yaharon will lead her planned performance in the Jewish quarter of Prague. This idea, however, illustrates the problems of expanding scenography or expanding PQ and opening it to new sorts of performance artists, while the main structure and the financial resource of PQ is mainly through the national organizations. With the fall of the Soviet Empire, the influence of the sole remaining empire of the USA has increased. One aspect of that was shift from practitioners' unions to academic organizations, which indeed include practitioners, but as we can see even here, most of ours are teachers, professors, researchers, and students, whereas independent practitioners, especially from small countries, can't afford it. The PQ2 team is right to look for new forms that will appeal to new audience, but it seems that the community is slower to adapt, and some creative thought should go into this direction. I would like to conclude these notes by hinting at such thought my visit to PQ 215, which was too brief, but still, free of my past slavery exhibition, I could enjoy some of the vast choice enough to be inspired by the experience. I found myself mainly rethinking mostly about performance, forced to try and redefine it for myself. Much of the things I saw did not work for me as performance pieces, and so I called them performed design rather than design for performance. Still, this is a whole new subject that will be discussed some other time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tali, and I will invite Marina and Stefania for the discussion. As I said in the beginning, all 3 were involved in several editions, so we really heard many ideas on the transformation over the years and over the edition, probably much more than in the previous discussions. And the thoughts or the ideas that were mentioned in all 3 presentations and also in the morning discussion, or the most important was the audience, the spectator, the public or the target group, as in marketing words. So for who is the PQ done? And we have struggled with this topic with Soja and the team over the years again and again, because we were doing it for the professionals and for the general audience. And we mixed it and divided it and mixed it again, and it was really big struggle. So maybe all three probably presented all they wanted to say on this topic, who are the targets. So maybe I will start immediately with the audience, if any of you have any comments to this or other questions. Okay, comments.
Just the fact that a participant who comes for a specific reason is also an audience. We need to remember an audience member.
I wanted to say that that's the point of view or the perception of the spectator is usually what is his role, if it is only the audience or if he or she was somehow involved in the previous PQ or in the current PQ. And one of the solution of the last PQ was that we wanted to involve the person who is coming to the PQ in any of the role, in any other role. So there were, I would say, millions of possible ways how to change the only audience or only passive audience role in many ways. And also there were many possibilities for the professional who come to change his role into other role, being a participant of workshop, being an audience in the lecture hall, or being a participant in the tribe, whatever. So we, I would say, play with the role of the people who are coming. So maybe someone else.
Can I add on this something? I think we also need to think of the new fields of art and theory and other organizations that deal with performance, that deal with street theater, and involve them in PQ. As I was watching the beautiful street things, I was thinking there are several hundreds of directors of street festivals in the world. They should all, I don't know if we should submit to the marketing ideas of target audience. I prefer community. And it is obvious that the theater people are still the community that see PQ as our territory, because we keep talking about other stuff, but we have people that maybe were trained as architects or other things, but somehow found their way into the theater. And the main community that exists is of theater people. Some of them are willing to expand, some of them are not, but we can try and add other fields of artists. And also, like, at least in Israel, most of the theater artists that would fit into these new definitions will not use theater designers as designers. They are mostly creators that do their whole work themselves. And we should find a way to include them in this.
I have a question to the organizers, I guess, because we are greedy. These theater people, we are. And we find it terribly inviting to include more groups, more people, more. Where will this stop? Is it manageable? How do you deal with this? Because yes, of course, it was so liberating, this past PQ, to be able to it was a joy, but it was pure joy. But at the same time, I thought it must have been pure terror. And where does that stop so that this is something that is not out of control and becomes a negative experience at the end?
Before I give you the voice, I will only say one sentence, that everyone is telling us all the time, it is too huge, it is not possible to manage it, but I have another idea to add. It was always the first reception that we had, so... No one wants to react on the audience topic or on the... Dorita?
Oh, hi. I think one of the really exciting innovations recently was the idea that PQ is not every 4 years anymore. That there is one big event every 4 years, but there are smaller events over the years. I just thought that was brilliant and very important initiative. But one of the concerns I've had, that I've talked over with Sodia very briefly, is that it tends to be very EU focused. And I know that's because of money and funding. But I feel like one thing we could do was I love that, you know, that PQ has these kind of smaller events, and that those events could really be international, that they could be regional. And I mentioned I did a similar thing for Performance Studies International with Fluid States. So we had, you know, these different events in Manila, in the Cook Islands, in Ethiopia, in India, in Lebanon, and you know, in these different smaller states, in order to start getting local or regional discussions happening. So it's just that would mean really partnering, I'm sure, for funding and things like that. But I think it would be also a really good way of increasing the claim to internationalization, which is something, it's very easy. I feel like you have to keep working at that. Even, you know, Beth and I are organizing something that's meant to be international, and we realized that we probably could have focused even more on really getting people that it's very easy to have the same players or to have the same countries participate.
Yeah, I think because when we started with the symposium, all these things, they were not only based on what we wanted and that we did it, but the local organizer did it. So, and PQ cannot make it also, definitely. All these events are important that you in your country will start with it, with PQ somehow connected. And maybe it reminds me some of the ideas that were also in the presentation about the post-life of the expositions, of national expositions after PQ, but also what changed in the previous year is the pre-life, especially, I don't know, one of the examples is Dutch exposition, when there is, but in many other countries, there is a long-term research and work towards to the exposition, and not only the kind of selection that was probably in the old editions, but there is a long-term process that leads to the final step in the quadrennial.
Yes, I was just going to say, I love this mood. I think this is the mood we need to be in. And it's definitely not marketing, it's communication. And I think personal communication and interaction is what we should be aiming at. I mean, we've been talking about how we want more meetings, to talk more, to get to know each other's work. This is the type of mood that needs to permeate, is that the word? And make things happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, may I ask Sonia, what is the next theme? To start the new...
Probably, but it is not on us. It's there's a new artistic director, Markéta Fantova, and that's what is it at this moment. Because the old PQ is finishing at this moment and the new one will start. So, or if Markéta wants something to add. Unfortunately, Pavla is not here anymore, so this is not on us.
Well, we sort of touched on that in the last presentation as to where we're going, and what's happening right now is all this information that you're giving us is essential, and it's really important for the new team to hear what happened in the past and what were the challenges. We'll evaluate that and work with it in order to somehow work it into the next vision. And I don't know exactly, do you have more specific question, or is it just because this is incredibly wide open question? You're basically asking what is the next vision? Well, next vision is being made.
It was the question, who is team? What is the next team?
Oh, what's the next
team? Working team.
Okay. A theme. So theme. So the vision. Sorry. Yes, you are asking about the vision. It is not done yet, that I can tell you. And I guess what is important to say, what you are talking about right now, right here, will be important for the new vision. So all these things you're saying are being part of a process of making up the new vision. Is that helpful? I know I'm not giving you any concrete answers because I cannot at the moment.
Okay, so Karen?
Yeah, it's already said, but what I heard it some of you saying, and it's very interesting how to, if you talk about the audience for the PQ, is this the independent designers, and I think you can add it to these local events or something, but it's something that we saw in Holland, and I heard it is in many other countries, that this connection to institutions, money-wise, also splits the country into the ones connected to the institutions and the others. And it was very interesting for us as a platform scenography independent, trying to at least get people curious about the PQ. Because you can hardly imagine in this space, but PQ isn't known apart from the insiders. So I love the community and I want to be in, but that's what I wanted to add.
Jessica.
I was really interested, Tal, in your comment about universities and the sort of rise of the presence of universities at PQ. And I think this is, it's not a question, it's a kind of call to action, because in a time where we're all suffering from cuts, it's thinking about how can universities enable artists to come to PQ? How can we mobilize networks? How can we be responsible for making sure that people who are wrestling with the material and would really benefit from PQ can get there? So I think it's our responsibility to make sure that happens.
I'm not against universities in any ways and other kind of schools. It is just that, for example, in Israel, that used to have a very strong program of scenography education. We are soon to have none. And many other countries do not have this kind of, I mean, if we go back to the start, the programs of teaching scenography are fairly new. And you have nowadays many people like the architects present that would start their education in art schools or with no formal education at all. But still, I mean, I'm trying to say that the community of practitioners is just as important. I mean, I'm not saying don't have the students. I'm not saying stop teaching. I teach myself. I just started a new school. But I'm just saying that the way things are seemed when you are within a research project is a little different than the way it is when you sit, let's say, in the very helpful curator forum that you held here that are in a different field, like problems like she talked about in Holland are everywhere. Grant raising is like the main issue everywhere. Traveling to Europe is a huge task, which makes us all very envy of you that can go without crossing borders. So it's just that I'm saying that we should remember the original community, and the community is not just the audience, it's also a conference and a meeting place. The one thing that keep being raised as a need, I think from the first time I came, was a meeting place, just a meeting place. And so it doesn't change that.
So you wanted to something yet before? No? No, okay.
Sorry, I talked too much, but I must say that for the first time this year, I mean, I've been coming since 2007. I come to the airport, I take a taxi. Taxi driver asks, what are you here for? I say, the Prague Quadrennial. Had no idea what this is. For the first time this year, the taxi driver really said, oh yeah, they knew, and started telling me about the street stuff. So this is one side effect that's great, because suddenly your people here know.
It was really rare exception, taxi driver. Was probably father of someone from team, otherwise I cannot imagine. Oh yeah. Ex-designer. Maybe reminding me question a bit EU-centric or Europe-centric PQ is not only a question of money. I would say it's a question that we are here and Sodia cannot be everywhere in all countries. Every year we try to have international team, but it has certain limits. So just kept, as it is not possible to capture all the disciplines, approaches, then also not the all countries. So I think this is not only, so this is definitely not only a question of money.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just saying it's a kind of a head thing.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to defer. You know, it's like when you're trying to think, who shall we get? And then you think of the big stars or a lot of men, for example. You know, so many women organising, but when it comes to the stars, you've got Robert, blah, 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 you know. So I guess what I'm thinking is, you know, not only that, but there could be these regional events where we do invite you guys, you know, where we really do start to have these events that can be conferences that intersect between the academy and the artists. I've always loved what the UK does, which I'm sure other countries do. It's something that we tried to do when we first got involved, which was to have a big exhibition, a national exhibition. For the first time, I organised us showing. I organised a big exhibition and conference, and you know. So I'm just wondering if there's just more. It's just something we have to keep in mind. You know, for example, I think that Australia and New Zealand could do something together, and maybe with the Pacific or Oceania, or you know, the Middle East or whatever, just to start to cluster and then to make sure we get those connections. It's work on our part as much as your part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, this is building on that, but also kind of going in another direction, which has to do with the thematics of the weather music politics in relationship to ideas of countries. Because weather doesn't behave and respect boundaries and borders, and music gets under your skin in spite of boundaries and borders, and political passion crosses borders and doesn't behave by those rules. And in the disciplines of space making, issues of ecology really look at notions of watersheds, or there's a shift in thinking about place as related to points and cities, but starting to think about watersheds and the notions of the kind of connectivity of places that share a watershed. And so the idea of gatherings that are not so much about borders, but everybody who's along a watershed, because actually you have vested, you ultimately care about the same things because of the connectivity between those places. So I guess what I'm tossing out there is this notion of these clusters and gatherings and conversations that are more fluid and mobile, droplets of water that go from oceans or glaciers into oceans and then land up on the other side of the world. So I think the notion of the fluidity of the conversation is really, really important. And yeah, I would love to see it come all the way around the world so that it's possible for more people to participate.
As a wave.
Well, I'm sitting next to a colleague from Cyprus, and I think in most of the PQs, Cyprus was next to Israel in the exhibition, so I feel quite at home. We are also neighbors in the world map. We have never met our colleagues from Cyprus or Greece, let alone Egypt or Syria, outside of Prague or other international events. It is much harder to arrange a meeting with our next door neighbors than come over here because of prestige, because of money, because of wanting to invest in it and all kind of things like this. We should do it, definitely. I've been talking to the friends from Turkey for ages about working together. We are good friends. We visit each other. But it is not so easy. And the hosting of Prague. But on the other hand, I think one way to let an event grow and not take on yourself a lot of work is lose some of control. I mean, people can arrange more events on their own during these. If I'm thinking of the way the Edinburgh Festival grew to be a monster, or you could just, people should just add things on their own.
We worked with people from Israel, but this was never, utilized by PQ. Or we work with people regionally, but there was never a connection. And maybe what she's saying is that maybe you need to look at how you can use it in a good way.
Marketa?
I'm just listening to all these conversations, and I think we are in the age when we over-communicate in a certain way when it comes down to emails and such, but we don't seem to communicate correctly about certain things. So just from my experience always being involved with PQ and very passionate about it, but being also outside, I had been asked several times to really spread the word, which I had been trying incredibly hard where I was at. And what I had been running into is one thing, which is working both ways, is the tradition of PQ and its name and its reputation, which is bringing the same people together over and over again, which is wonderful. But that's also happening with other institutions. So there are people who are doing performance art, and they're doing it beautifully, and they're doing interesting design discoveries as they're going through their process, and it would be wonderful to have them here. But when I contacted some of the very well-known ones who are working outside, the answer that got to me, the most shocking answer that got to me was, "You're not my people. I'm not going to go because I have a limited amount of money, I have a limited amount of time, and I'm going to really focus on what I want to see." And this is what I had been traditionally going to see. So there are these groups that are always clustered around a particular goal, theme, you name it. So I think maybe we can all do this is not just the leadership of PQ, this is the people who are sitting right here in this room, because it really boils down to an individual communication to the ones you know, and convince them that this is worthwhile coming to, even though they have their own people somewhere else. So breaking those boundaries. We have these invisible boundaries. We have nothing to do with the country boundaries, but we have a professional boundary that we put around ourselves. So we have to break those as well. And that's a run that's going to take a long time. I mean, it's going to take a long time because we're changing a culture, if that's something that we want to do. But a plea from the next PQ, please do that. It's very important. Try to break those boundaries. Thank you.
Abby? Or there somewhere?
Thank you very much. Okay. Just tracing a little path back through some of the comments and back to my experience, I suppose, in the UK. And the first time that I came to Prague in '95, when we were when I was part of organising the first exhibition that I was on, we were staying in a hostel. We had no money. There was a sort of group of younger designers. And in the morning, we were all having breakfast, and over on another table on the other side of the room was a group of people, sort of a bit older mostly. I think they were mixed. I don't think they were all men. And they were clearly discussing PQ. And I realized that was the IFTR meeting, who were a bunch of academics, and they were discussing us. And that was the most peculiar experience, because I was then just a theatre practitioner, and I hadn't encountered the world of academe. I had no idea that what we were doing was being discussed by other people, if you see what I mean. So now it's quite odd to be here partly as an academic, so-called academic, as well as somebody who comes from practice. So, and I've noted over the years the fact that there are fewer and fewer practitioners coming, if you like, and more academics who have been practitioners, but are coming funded by universities rather than by their national theatres or by their arts councils or by anything else. So that's one thing which is quite disturbing, really. I would say that the other thing is that one of the other things is it does need to be local. One of the first exhibitions I was involved with was a designer in the UK who held an exhibition of Northern theatres design in Manchester at the Royal College of Music, Royal Northern College of Music. And again, as a local working designer, I was just got a call, you know, we're doing an exhibition, would you put some work in? And it was just too much. I couldn't cope with it along with everything else, you know, and you're just thinking, what? Oh, there's just going to be some other designs there. It doesn't matter. I haven't got time to deal with this. Eventually pulled some stuff together. To my enduring shame, I didn't get a photograph in time in for the catalogue, little catalogue, and went along to it and was completely bowled over by all this wonderful work there, by people that I should have known better, you know, were doing just as interesting things as we thought we were at our theatre, and suddenly realised actually there was a community of people, they weren't very far away, and that one really needed to be involved with that. And so I think local exhibitions of work are really important, and we could be doing that regionally much better. To link into that, one of the big things that's happened for us in the UK is working with the V&A. It's very nice to see Kate Bailey here from the V&A. And that made a huge difference. The first couple of exhibitions I was involved with went to the Theatre Museum in Covent Garden as, you know, the home of theatre and so on. And that was a great institution, but it was sort of buried deep in that area, and it was only really visited by people who wanted to go to something with the name theatre in it. Since 2007, where we were invited to go to the V&A because the theatre collections went there, then actually it's brought an incredible range of general visitor into the theatre galleries, and they're very popular galleries in the museum. And so suddenly the work has actually become available to an enormous number of people. And by putting PQ on everything, making sure that the PQ exhibition is very visible in that, hopefully one's widening it. So I would make a really big appeal to thinking of, for countries to think about where else their work can be seen. Because if you just work on the basis of it seen in performance, nothing will happen, you know. It actually has to be gathered together in other places for it to achieve a momentum, and for the artists, the practitioners themselves, to actually perceive themselves to be a part of something.
Maybe, or you wanted to respond to that? No. Okay, then.
I was inspired by what Marina was asking about what the limits were, how do you describe or what make us to recognize ourselves, or which is our tribe? That's a big question. During the event, I invited to take part on the politics talks a lady from the Hemispheric Institute. And the Hemispheric Institute is very much based on performance studies. And I thought it was a nice combination, a nice participation for showing them a bit more what Prague Quadrennial is. And I found out that some people in that institute, they knew something about PQ, some are not really, had no idea what it was about. And for people here who doesn't know, the hemispheric is very much based on the Americas. It's very vertical from North America, Central and South America is a mix of English, Spanish, Portuguese spoken. And I've been taking part in Brazil in an organization of the event of a hemispheric in there, trying to get closer, to approximate, to find out if there was any space to introduce the idea or the focus on the design and the performance in what they are searching. And it's interesting because then you see that they have a very, very clear focus. They came here, they were amazed about the PQ, they found absolutely astonishing everything they saw, the movement, it was a big festival. But in the end, they have their own meeting, their own events, their own encounters, where they discuss performance studies. And there's nothing to be with design. So that's what I think we need to create, what we really are interest and focus here without losing the opportunity to make partners and to encounter people in another areas, but being very aware that there are some people who studying this, studying that, and what is our interest?
As a former board member of Performance Studies International, I know the Hemi well. Beth and I have just formed a working group in performance design. So that's another thing that you can do, is get performance design into other organisations. So, you know, there's never really been that much emphasis on design in PSI, but it's happening through us. So those are other things, as you say, that you can get involved. It's a really good idea.
Okay, so Michael, probably the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to say I agree with Macheta when she says we should be looking at trying to attract people and breaking those invisible boundaries, simply because interdisciplinarity is where we're at in our practice in 2016. We have to acknowledge that. No discipline is separate from any other, I would argue. The other thing I wanted to say is it's a kind of question, really, because I was interested in what you said about Edinburgh. And I've been to Edinburgh for the last couple of years, and actually some of the best things I've seen are things that aren't part of the festival or not even part of the fringe. In other words, they're kind of guerrilla performances that are just kind of happening and taking advantage of the fact that people are there to see performance. And I actually think it's very flattering. And I found out that the people in the fringe actually didn't mind this at all. They weren't stopping anything. They weren't, you know, they were letting these things happen. They weren't advertising it. They didn't have formal venues. They were just guerrilla performances. A lot in the street, obviously, but other places as well. And I wondered whether, as PQ organisers, or the people felt that that was a good thing. I personally think it is. And it's partly because, like PQ, people are very critical of the Edinburgh Festival because it's got so huge, and where are the parameters and where does it stop? And the fact is, maybe what they've admitted is it doesn't matter. Let it go. And I wondered how the organisers responded to that.
There is no response to it. It's I can only repeat the sentence that I said before. It's so huge, but I have another idea to add. There are many possible ways. So probably if there is no other reaction or question,
we can continue outside. There's
yes,
lunch.
because it was quite a long morning, so there's lunch outside. And
let's meet at 2 o'clock, and I also ask the people who are going to present to come to check the stuff.